Jenny Funkmeyer here, Parallel University. Today I sing the praise of Abraham Maslow. Woo! Here's a picture of him in his book, Motivation and Personality. This is the 3rd edition, and it's a library copy. This book is so beautiful. It's well thumbed. This is the kind of book that's been read by thousands upon thousands of people. I mean, I just feel the tremendous energy when I touch this book, when I read the words. I can feel Abraham Maslow thinking, talking to me. I can feel the millions, thousands upon thousands of people who had read this book, look through them, going back and forth, like this is wisdom right here. I love this book so much. I went to Amazon to try to buy it, and guess what? It is out of print, the 3rd edition, this particular one. In Amazon, they only have one, and it's super expensive. So I'm going to return it to the library today, but I'm like, oh, I hope nobody takes this. The world should read this book. Okay, so this book, let me explain Abraham Maslow. He's a psychologist, and most people have heard of him. He is the guy who came up with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, about what a person needs, the kind of development in a person's psychological development. You begin with taking care of your bodily needs, your food, your bodily functions, your sex drives, your love, sex, not love, because love is up here. Then you need to satisfy your safety, your lodging. You feel safe. You need to have your body taken care of. Spiritually, you feel safe and you feel love. And then you would then come to thinking about yourself, taking care of your self-esteem. Then at the highest level, you will be seeking spiritual development. In Abraham Maslow's word, he calls it self-actualization. In the spiritual realm, that I'm interested in, because Abraham Maslow is a straight-on psychiatrist. He doesn't really, in his days, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they don't really mix, a psychiatrist who's more a scientist than a guru, or Yogananda, someone like that, who is more a teacher of spirituality. The two things had not, they were just coming together at that time in the 50s. This book is published in 1954, first published in 1954, and so that's 54, 64, 74, 84, 94, 2004, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's 64 years. Oh my God, I'm 64 years old. So it was published the year I was born. So it took all this time for someone like me, I guess, to come together and putting, I love spirituality. I read Yogananda and I read Abraham Maslow, and it is this generation, me and you right now. You must be really a lot younger than me or older than me, but it is, I think, this time right now that we finally put spirituality and science together. And it's so funny because I read Abraham Maslow, and basically when he described a self-actualization process, and a person whom he calls self-actualizing individual is actually, in spiritual terms, we call it zation. Yogananda calls it self-realization, self-realization fellowship, or enlightenment, Buddha's enlightenment, or the Taoist immortality, or the ancient Egyptians mystery school. All those, really kind of spiritual, this is the direction that I come from, that kind of thing. Itemize and put forth as an example clearly of what an enlightened person would be like. I mean, this is truly using the Western mindset. Abraham Maslow is a Western mindset, and perhaps, Buddha and Yogananda, the Eastern spirituality mindset. It's really the same thing. It's really came together in his generation in the 50s, and then now and it's just now coming together in this generation, right? So just first thing I want to say, I so admire Western style thinking. I come from China, and I have an Eastern base education. And when I came to America after high school, and then I went to college, I really noticed the two brains, the two ways of thinking are actually very different. Actually, my upbringing in the East and my continued education in the West made me a kind of an East and West person. It also gave me dyslexia because I was educated in thinking one way, and then I come to America and I think the other way altogether. So I found out that dyslexia was not a mental illness, upbringing, who I am. And it was through reading Abraham Maslow's book that I realized, wow, I am not mentally studying sick people and animals. And when he's a young psychologist, he realized, well, you can't. Behavioral psychology is about studying animals in a lab. How can you find what lab animals is doing and then just put it and say that that's how a human being will behave in society? Like, behavioral psychology has its use, but like just the concept of it right now, when we think about it, it's like, really, a rat in a lab being fed, stimulants, and like that finding is now a standard behavior. Supposedly, this is a human being is supposed to behave like in the same situation. Well, no, we are human beings in society, and that's a rat in a lab. So in a way, behavioral science is like psychology is like, okay. The other main influence is Freud, right? And Freud is obviously, by now we know, Carl Jung was the first to point out, it's like, well, maybe not everyone has sexual problem in their childhood. Maybe it's only you a brilliant man who has problem in your childhood, in sexual problem in your childhood, and now you think the entire world, the entire population, everyone is like you. So, there has been a lot of psychology has gone wrong in many ways. And the biggest way is to studying mentally ill people and using that as a standard to measure the population. So we ended up thinking, wow, if there must be something wrong with me, because in the land of the blind, the seeing eye man is a sick man. I mean, that's what it's telling me right now after reading his book. So let me begin by telling you how what I find really, really interesting is a person's, when you study a person, I don't study what that person say until I figure out what the teacher, how he had lived his life. Because I think this is again Abraham Maslow's brilliance. He said, you can't really separate that person's life with what this person is teaching or this person's work. A person's work is an extension of this person's life. First thing I read in this book very happily is a short biography. So let me tell you how Abraham Maslow kind of developed his theory. Abraham H. Maslow was born on April 1st, 1908. My God, it was just April 1st, 2018. Happy birthday, Abraham Maslow. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and his parents was Russian Jewish immigrants. His father was a barrel maker before he moved to the United States from Russia as a young man. After he became settled, he wrote to a female cousin in Russia and asked her to come to the United States and marry him. She did. So Abraham Maslow was first of their 7 children. He was an extraordinarily shy, neurotic young man, depressed, terribly unhappy, lonely, and self-ejecting. So, he thought he through his own work. So he thought, he must be something wrong with him, but through his own work, he's find out not only is he not wrong, he's mentally healthy. Because he says, with my childhood, it's a wonder I am not psychotic. I was the little Jewish boy in a non-Jewish neighborhood. It was a little like being the first Negro, that word they use, enrolled in a all-white school. I was isolated and unhappy. I grew up in libraries among books without friends. Both my mother and father were uneducated. So, I mean, think about it. A boy who is extremely interested in knowledge, right? He said, my father wanted me to be a lawyer. I tried law schools for 2 weeks. Then I came home to my poor father one night and told him I couldn't be a lawyer. Well, son, he said, what do you want? I told him I want to study everything. He was an uneducated man and couldn't understand my passion for learning, but he was a nice man. I mean, it's a childhood of a man who loves to learn, who grew up to be Abraham Maslow, one of the heroes of human history. Um, and that's his childhood. I mean, people get, no wonder when you're a little child, you look at your family and you're like, my family is not like me at all. That they must be right, I must be wrong, because you're just kind of like a little baby. You have no idea what's right or wrong. You look at the people around you, especially your mother and your father and your friends and the neighborhood. You know, that everybody is white. There's no Jewish people. There are no Russians. You know, like it's like he learned. Mother has postpartum blues and committed suicide a month after giving birth to my mother. Her father blamed the baby, my mother, for his loss. Within months, he took in a whore as a mistress. Her delight was to physically abuse my mother in front of him. I mean, I grew up with a strange ways at confusing times. She was a tangled web of insanity, mixing downright insanity with truly sanely behavior. She was a tangled web of intensity, mixing downright insanity with truly sanely behavior. And that's how I grew up. I loving my mother so much, but she was just learning how to be a normal mother. She doesn't know. And I am a tiny baby. I remember I was like, my first memory is looking up at my mother, and she was so intense. She was like that, and I just like, I freeze. I couldn't breathe. And I think that's when I picked up asthma. It was like, whoa, what is wrong? I'm just a little baby. I can't figure out what's wrong. And from that moment, really till to just recently, I read Abraham Maslow the whole time. The whole time. In this book, I said I actually listed my mental illness in such a long list that I have to alphabetize them. I have to start from A to Z because I have so many conditions. And I thought I have all these conditions, but then it's either I had them, I probably had them, you know, in my youth, in my childhood, in my youth, but today I feel like I'm really good. Reading this book, reading Abraham Maslow's book, gave me the guideline as to what a healthy person means. You know, like I didn't know, literally didn't know what a healthy person is. I mean, do you know what a healthy person is? I know, you know, we think, you know, a healthy body, we know. A person who is not overweight, not too thin, you know, digestive system is good, goes to the bathroom, that leads, you know, there's no pain, no headaches. I mean, we know what a healthy body looks like, but do we know what a healthy mind actually is? It's really good to have a a real sure guidance from a pro who knows exactly how to measure mental health. I mean, that's what a psychologist is. A psychologist is not a person who try to fix your mental illness. That's another thing. When you go to see a psychologist, they automatically assume that you must be sick or you won't come to see them, right? But they don't like automatically measure how healthy you are. Maybe your so-called pathology, your mental illness is actually not a mental illness, but really just your reaction to society, your way of coping, your way of dealing. Because I'm going to tell you what a healthy person is according to David Maslow, and you can compare yourself to that list and find out how healthy you are. It's so good to actually know that you're healthy and not sick. Um, the way Abraham Maslow found out about this theory, and in his day, 64 years ago, 70, 100 years ago, actually, when Abraham Maslow was working in his prime, he it's all, psychology is all about illness. It's not about health at all. 100 years ago. So how did he figure this out? He's like a pioneer, a groundbreaking pioneer. How did he find out? He said he has two teachers. Their name was Wertheimer, the founder of Gestalt therapy. Maslow was deeply inspired by Benedict and Wertheimer. Not only were they brilliant, creative, highly productive scholars, but they were also warm, caring, mature human beings. He began keeping a notebook on them, trying to analyze what made them such marvelous human beings as well as brilliant scholars. Maslow contrasts Benedict and Wertheimer with Hitler, examples of the best and the worst of humanity. Abraham Maslow says, "My investigations on self-actualization was not planned to be research and did not start out as research. They started out as the effort of a of high IQ devotion. I could not be content simply to adore, but sought to understand why these two people were so different from the run-of-the-mill people in the world. Those two people were Ruth Benedict and Mark Wertheimer. They were my teachers after I came with a PhD from the West to New York." I take notes on Ruth and take notes on Marx when I try to understand them, think about them, and write about them in my journal and my notes. I realized in one wonderful moment that the two patterns could be generalizing. I was talking about a kind of person, not about two non-compatible individuals. These were wonderful excitements in that. I tried to see whether this pattern could be found elsewhere, and I did find it in one person after another. Abraham Maslow basically spent his life studying healthy people, and his therapy to treat or help people, mentally unhealthy people, were based on a comparison of how healthy people should be. Not at his time, the usual psychology, which is to compare a person to a sick person, to a mentally ill person. And that's a major groundbreaking contribution that really helped me today to realize I'm not as sick as I thought. I'm not as mentally as sick as I thought, or maybe I was once really sick and I am not that sick anymore, because a lot of abnormal behavior that I find myself doing was described by Abraham Maslow as totally normal for healthy people. Because healthy people, we have this totally kind of unrealistic demands put on us, that we think we look up to geniuses. You know, people like Mozart, 3 years old, he can play piano. After he listens to it once, he's composing, arias and big pieces. When he was 6 years old, he's famous all over Europe already. Like, we compare ourselves to those people, to Mozart, to Beethoven, to super genius. Actually, and we think we are a failure because we're not like that. But actually, that could be called, that level of genius actually could be called mental illness, because Maslow said, we don't understand genius. We don't know where it came from, and we don't really know a lot about that. And in my upbringing, in my way of thinking, I always compare myself to the best. I mean, especially right now on the internet, the best is all in one place, and when you compare yourself to the best person in each field doing their things, you're like, shit, forget it. I would never be that good, right? So it's kind of like, it's hard. It's really hard. But instead of comparing ourselves to the genius, to the highest achiever in our society, in our current world, that is actually abnormal. That's not what we're aspiring to. We should be aspiring to be just a mentally healthy person living life. Not as a genius, not as some failure just because I'm not Mozart if I play the piano. But if I just, play the piano a little bit just for fun, that's a healthy, self-actualizing individual, or we call them, a person who is in self-realization, or a Buddha in the making. That's a normal, healthy person. You are not sick. You are normal and healthy, and you exhibit normal human tendency. That's another thing. Normal human tendency is now considered, so many of those things are considered wrong, like wrong. I mean, if you fart in public, it's like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Other people's like, instead of like, okay, it's a human bodily function, right? It's like, okay, you exhibit, like, you see a girl and you go, I really love her, and that's considered abnormal sexual behavior. When no, these are all normal human beings. We are animals, and we have stopped giving ourselves credit for our animal instincts, for our natural animal behavior. And that's all considered gross and wrong and no good. We are supposed to all be Mozart, Shakespeare, and if I'm not, I'm just some dumbass, nobody, working in the post office or at a store. When Abraham Maslow described a totally uneducated woman who is, you know, is a girl and then was a mother and then was a grandma, and she cooks great food. She was a very good mother. She was a very good sister to her family. There's something about her that she can decorate the house really well. She makes do with very little. Everyone around her is happy. Well, that turned out to be a self-actualized master. That's the new gold standard. We have stopped giving an uneducated woman who we have stopped looking up to those people. We look up to heroes. That's in itself is a sick attitude. Is an attitude of, like in the land of the blind, who is the blindest guy must be a genius, and the seeing eye guy is sick. That's something that it's relevant to me, and I hope it's ringing a bell for you. So for me, Abraham Maslow, met his two teachers, and for me, I met my husband, Mr. Otis Funkmeyer, when I was 53 years old. And in my opinion, Otis is not a sick guy. Otis is one of these self-actualizing individuals. He exhibits a lot of downside, a lot of, just bad boy behavior. But that is a normal human animal. He is still he is really a mentally healthy person. He may be he's at his age right now, in his late 30s, he's really goal-oriented, so he's really self-centered. He's like, he wants what he wants, but that is still normal. That's what a man's supposed to be in his age, right? And for me, as a 64-year-old woman, I am going through what Abraham Maslow calls the second naivete. The first naivete was when you are a child. You're just naive. You just do things. You are a self-actualized master. You are Buddha as soon as you were born, and then you learn to be not a Buddha. And then when you are in your 60s, from 60 to 90 is a time to learn to childhood naivete, become a child again with wisdom. And that's the normal human. Trying to unlearn all the mental illness that I learned during the last 64 years, and now trying to become a child again. And thank God I have the time to be that person again, and investigating my own psychological health. This is a great book, but I find chapter 11, Self-Actualizing People, a Study of Psychological Health, the most beneficial chapter for me. So let me explain some of what he says. Let me not forget this. Psychology terms is called self-actualization. And in the spiritual terms, in my teacher, Nisargadatta's terms, hold on a minute. There he is, my most respected spiritual teacher, Nisargadatta. The path is called I Am. It's called the I Am path. I am, self-actualization, right? realization, it's all the same thing. It's spiritual. This book, motivation and psychology, and book from different end of the spectrum, from the east and from the west, same thing. Oh, the book was written in 1954. In that day, in those days, I didn't know that. I actually have never been to a psychiatrist. I'm one of these self-healing people. Like, I hate going to doctors. I vow. I told my body, don't go bad because I ain't gonna fix it. I'm just gonna try to make do. You know, I lost my teeth and like I didn't go back to the dentist, and now I have no teeth. This is how I'm gonna do it. So I always thought I'm mentally ill, but I've never been to a psychologist. And I didn't know that psychology, I mean, had I gone like the psychologist, I mean, I think people don't like, I'm kind of an idiot savant. I'm really smart in one way and really dumb in another way. And at the same time, I'm like really smart, really dumb. So I never really know that. That's what psychology is. It's people specialize in really minutely measuring, you know, your for me, I like your interests, right? Your interests, a psychologist, I would call interest, but a psychologist will break it down into so many categories. And in each category, they know how to measure the intensity of each category. Say the word love, but then for them, it's like so many different kinds of love and so many ways to measure the love. So these are like pros of mental health. And these pros have all been educated to look at people all as sick people and not as healthy people. No, this is a generalized term. Sorry, that's just me. That's generalizing. I'm sure there's a lot of psychology, especially psychologists who is on the Abraham Maslow way. That way of psychology, I'm sure it's. So if you have a psychologist right now, you have a therapist that's helping you, ask him about Abraham Maslow. Ask him about what he thinks about healthy people. I mean, a doctor studies sick people. A doctor do not study healthy people. We should put a lot more emphasis in studying psychologically healthy people. So let's begin by the most important trait, the most important thing that Abraham Maslow finds between a healthy person and a run-of-the-mill person, like a super healthy. Making this, when he initially started studying healthy people, in order to get information to write this book and his other books, he interviewed 3,000 college students, and he only found one mentally healthy person, healthy enough to be a subject to study. So that's like 3,000 to 100 years ago. I don't know if we have fewer healthy people today or more healthy people today. There hasn't been a widespread, this is what I mean, a widespread discovery of how healthy we are. I mean, we know how sick we are. Everybody talks about how sick we are, but do we know how healthy we are? So what is the most important trait of a mentally healthy person, healthy in the degree of like Abraham Maslow's two teachers? Those people are warm, highly effective scholars, very accomplished people, and also warm and loving and kind human beings. What is the most important trait of them? It is their effective perception of reality. Actually going on with the host, and then we'll be able to wisely, in a very kind of gentle, wonderful way, say, oh, I'm getting tired, I think I'll go home. And the host will be able to say, oh, no, 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 stay. And the person, because this person is not mentally ill, is mentally healthy, will be able to say, no, I think I'll go home. And the host will say, yes, thank you, and walks you out. And then as soon as you are gone, the host is like, oh, thank God he's left early because I'm so tired. I don't know why I'm so tired, right? So that's what makes a mentally healthy person seems very compassionate, and that behavior has huge ramification in a mentally healthy person's life and the way they create their reality and the way they live in this world. Whereas we only have studied people who don't pick up social cues. We have a name for those people. We call them Asperger syndrome, or sometimes we call them Russians, because I find that the Russian people I meet, because they grow up in such a different way of socially show their what people are thinking. I mean, there must be something between the Russian upbringing and the American upbringing. Like, Russians don't read American cues. They may need more clues or something, like, anyway, they just don't read the American way of showing something. They kind of, and Americans go to Japan or some very polite Asian country and also completely misread social cues, right? And we have a name for misreading social cues. We call them people with mild case of Asperger or severe case of Asperger. That's another thing. There is severe cases. It's like, why you have Asperger? You didn't pick that up, right? But we don't have a name for healthy of perception of reality. I mean, what are those people called? Those people call. We don't have a name for them. Isn't that something? I mean, a person who is really smooth, who is like highly effective in one's career and is a kind, caring, compassionate, loving individual, and everything in her life seems to go smoothly. They're surrounded by a lot of loving people. Things go well. I mean, if a person is doing very well, not making a lot of money, not achieving high status, we only have names for those people who are rich are called rich people. People who are famous are called stars. People, you know, we don't have a name for an undereducated woman who is very good in raising her children over the years, exhibit tremendous creativity in decorating the house, making do with very little money. We don't have a name for someone like that. We don't call them. We don't call them Buddhas. We don't call them enlightened individuals. We need to come up with a name. We need to call them like something. Let's come up with like a great phrase for just the normal human animal that is functioning perfectly. So, what are those traits for a normal, healthy, mentally healthy individuals? What are the things? Abraham Maslow said a lot of this has the root cause in the fact that they see reality as what it is. They see what's going on. They see the facts. They are not stuck in their own fantasy of what this fact means. They don't see something and hope and desire and want it to be a certain way that it is not. They are very effective in just looking at what's going on and saying, you know, a square is a square, a circle is a circle. They don't look at a square from the point of view that, holy shit, this is not a circle. Or look at a circle and say, wow, it should be a... That's the mental illness. That's the mental fantasy, unable to see facts, unable to interpret what's going on in your life correctly. This leads to all kinds of problems. And it is because we were educated to be go-getters, to be goal-oriented, to be successful, to go after being rich and famous. And that has made things so much worse. They are creating more and more mental illness in us right now. And to know what a natural, mentally healthy animal, human animal does, the first thing is acceptance. Acceptance. Mentally healthy people, the first and most obvious level of acceptance is at the so-called animal level. Those self-actualizing people tend to be good animals, hearty in their appetites, and enjoy themselves without regret or shame or apology. Listen to that. A healthy person enjoys themselves without regret or shame or apology. Most of us are so ashamed of ourselves, of failing our mother's expectation, our teacher's expectation. We're always taught that we need to do better. You need to do better. You need to work harder. Well, a self-actualizing individual can enjoy themselves without regret, without looking at yourself and saying, oh, I did that, I made a mistake, I'm a person who has sinned. Fuck, man, they told me in school that I was born with original sin, like I was born and I am sinned. Just by being born with original sin, like a sin that I committed. I don't know how, but I am sinned. So, you know, I went to Catholic girls' school for 12 years. From the time that I didn't even know, and I was raised by a Catholic mother who was very devout Catholic. She's a great woman. She's like Maslow said, she's a great woman. But it's like, I didn't even, my brain was not even formed. I was just a little baby, and I was told just endlessly, all the way till high school graduation, every day, you've sinned, your original sin, your original sin, your original sin. You got to pray, you got to go to church for your original sin. Just, believe Jesus has helped you, like that. So I'm always like regretful. Oh, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. So many of us are like that. So many of us, enjoy your life without regret, shame, or apology. Or I ride my bicycle on the streets, and when I approach someone and they come on the pedestrian, a lot of times I'm on the pedestrian sidewalk, and there'd be pedestrian walk, come up to them on my bicycle, I will ring my bell, and they very nicely walk aside so I can go by, right? You know what? Most people, because I do this like 20, 30 times a day, most people who walk aside says, I am sorry. What is there to be sorry about? They just did a kind thing for a cyclist who comes with their bicycle, and they moved aside so she could pass. So, and they say, I'm sorry. Like, no, don't be so sorry. All the time, people are apologizing for themselves. They seem to sleep well. They have good appetite. They seem to enjoy their sex. Able to accept themselves not only on those low levels, but in all levels. For example, love, safety, belongingness, honor, self-respect. All these are accepted without question as worthwhile, simply because these people are inclined to accept the work of nature rather than to argue with it, or for not having constructed things to a different pattern. This shows itself in a relative lack of disgust and aversion seen in average people, and especially in neurotics, such as food annoyances, disgust with body products, body odors, and body functions. That's a neurotic. A neurotic person is just very like upset that, like we can't smell our armpits smelling. Oh, that's not acceptable. We fart, no, that's not acceptable. This like we burp, no, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I burped. Burp, a mentally healthy person is not adversely, they show a lack of disgust, right? Closely related to self-acceptance and to acceptance of others is their lack of defensiveness, protective coloration, or pose. That just says it. Our upbringing and society right now trains us to be quite defensive when we go out. And if you're not defensive, if you don't put on your armor and be strong and up and happy, I mean, go to YouTube, the confessional videos, go to Facebook. I mean, you see people posting wonderful times of themselves, right? There's no people like just posing. I mean, we think posing an ordinary good day is not good enough. We think we can't just like go to school. We have to be an A student. We have to win an award. We can't just like write an article, to go into a book club. I mean, we just need too much to be satisfied, and life is not supposed to be like that. Life is not supposed to be extremely satisfying like that. Life is extremely satisfying just the way it is. That's why he said they accept highly healthy, mentally healthy people accept nature as it is. Just life is the way it is. Life is the way it is. You don't have to win an award, have a birthday, to make a special day every day. Every day is already a special day. And these people also have discussed in people that are like that are cunning, guile, hypocrisy, putting up a front, putting on a face, playing a game, trying to impress in conventional ways. These are all absent in a healthy person in an unusual degree. This is not an absolute lack of guilt, shame, sadness, anxiety, or defensiveness. It is a lack of unnecessary or neurotic because is unrealistic, guilt, and the like. The animal process, sex, urination, pregnancy, masturbation, growing old, etc., are part of reality, and so must be accepted. Healthy people do feel guilty about, or ashamed, anxious, sad, or regretful are: one, improvable shortcomings like laziness, thoughtlessness, loss of temper, hurting others. Two, stubborn remnants of psychological ill health, prejudice, jealousy, envy. Number three, habits which, though relatively independent of character structure, may yet be very strong. So the mentally healthy person accepts themselves to a very healthy degree, and if they feel ashamed or anxious or sad about themselves, is really because it's something that they could improve. They're not neurotically ashamed of themselves just for being, just for the way they are. Okay. So when a healthy person is able to accept themselves and other people, I think what it translates into the spiritual realm is compassion for themselves and compassion for others. Okay, the next thing is spontaneity. Self-actualized people can be all described as thoughts, impulse, and so on. Their behavior is marked by simplicity and naturalness, and lack of artificiality or straining for effect. So they're spontaneous. They can change on a dime because they're just carrying less rules and regulations that is imposed on them. They have their own codes of ethics. They're able to just like, you know, in just a very short time become, you know, change course. They're not like stuck on doing things one way because this way is right and I gotta do it this way because my family does it this way, my culture does it this way, and I must do it this way. There are some people that do that really well, but most people don't. A mentally healthy person actually learns what the ancestors do and then do it their own way. That's the only way you can be spontaneous, is to do things your own way. So a mentally healthy person actually has their own code of conduct, and sometimes it looks not so good because other people are expecting you to do things the exact same way. This is how our society right now. We reward repetition. You know, you repeat. Specialists. We reward people who are specialists, who has done the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, I understand a specialist, a brain surgeon, is a highly valuable person, but that's not a person that repeats things. A person who repeats things is what we require of our so-called working people now. We make them do things, assemble the car. You know, it started with Henry Ford, the assembly line, boom, ding, boom, ding, boom, ding, boom, ding. Just do the same thing all day. That's just hell. That's what create a society of mentally ill people, because mentally stable, healthy people are spontaneous. They change on a dime. They're just unpredictable, changeable people. You can never really, we say, we can't rely on you, to someone who changes their mind, when changing your mind is a healthy person. Not changing your mind, sticking to the same thing no matter what, we call that strength. Yes, in a lot of times that is strength, but then in a lot of times it's not. A person who is spontaneous has their own kind of strength. Not only